Girls? Oh, I can't hear you yet. Disconnecting your audio. You're muted. Hang on. There you go.
Morning, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Did you have a nice Easter weekend?
I did, yes. We enjoyed the weather. We enjoyed the...
Okay, so just recording. So thanks everybody for joining today. Apologies on the recording for last week. I went to download it from Zoom and Zoom decided to update my account at the same time. So I've had to send the file off to get them to do something with it. So hopefully I'll release that as soon as possible. So thanks very much for joining. Is everybody well, and did everybody have a good Easter bank holiday?
It was lovely, wasn't it?
It was. The weather was really nice, wasn't it? It does make a difference, I think. I think when the nice weather stops, if it starts over like a rainy spell, I think we're going to probably feel it a little bit more, aren't we? So, but it just feels like, you know, when I sent you the message yesterday, I'd forgotten that today was Thursday. It's like...
I know. I mean, I was thinking, God, it's Wednesday afternoon. I better remind everybody.
Good job you did.
Yeah, it's bizarre, really. It's nearly the end of the week, isn't it? It's crazy. So, that's good. So as long as everybody got a bit of sunshine and some rest and stuff, so that's good. That's really positive. So, good. Okay. So I think we intended to continue the conversation where we left off last week in regards to, we were talking about mental health, well-being, support for apprentices, particularly. I know there were some really good resources shared in the group, so thanks, Anne, for that. Paul, I think you shared some stuff as well, which was really helpful. So it might be good just to continue that conversation and bring in and share some of the information that we've gleaned since then. And we also talked about momentum for apprentices on programme as well, so what we could do to continue that during this tricky time. And also, I think the UFI bid has been delayed. The announcement to that has been delayed until Friday afternoon, I think, as well, because they had unprecedented applications. Paul, I think you shared with the group, didn't you, in terms of the email that you...
Yeah, the email came through on Saturday, I think it was. So yeah, due to the volume of applications, they want to give them all due consideration. So they've delayed by 3 days. So yeah, we should at some point tomorrow get updates and notifications.
Yeah. Okay. Well, fingers crossed again for everybody. And did you get an email that said the same as well?
Absolutely. Over the weekend, same as you, I guess, Paul. So I must admit my initial reaction was, darn it, so many people applied. But we'll see.
Yeah, I think it was advertised quite heavily, wasn't it, on social media platforms? So probably a lot of people picked it up that might not have picked it up traditionally. Interesting. Okay, cool. So so let's go into the conversation around mental health then. So, Anne, do you just want to give us a bit of a summary of the resources that you kindly shared with us on the group and what people might be able to glean from that? And perhaps that will then start the conversation in regards to what else we can share and where we can support our apprentices from that perspective.
I don't have too much detail, to be honest, but I'm part of another network. It's called the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses. I don't know if any of you have heard of it, but our business went through that program in 2017. And it's where Goldman Sachs support smaller, high growth potential businesses. So I've got a fantastic cohort of contacts within that group who have pretty much all been massively impacted by the current situation, either because their business has gone berserk and they're struggling to cope, or because their revenues have dropped off a platform. And the resources I shared were some of the resources that have been shared within that group. So I know they'd found them useful in part, so I thought I would share it. And then the final one I shared was from Coaching Culture. And that's a network again of people that I'm connected to and have introduced some of their products to our clients, and it just seemed like a timely link to share.
Brilliant.
If I'm honest, I would say, and it'd be interesting to get other people's perspectives, I'm starting to feel a bit of a shift this week towards people being a little bit over the talk about resilience and coping and now wanting some practical focus and solutions to crack on. But we tend to deal obviously with the client contacts rather than the people at the shop, perhaps. So it'd be interesting to hear other people's perspectives on that.
Yeah, that's really interesting actually. So you're seeing more of a shift of that's great, but what does it actually mean? What can I actually do with that? Is that what you mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah. What's everyone's thoughts on that? Sarah?
Yeah, we found that because I run a HR directors network, and obviously my heart goes out to the HR directors at the moment because they can't be ahead of the game, they can't plan, and even like today there's going to be an update, and that means they were like, my weekend's just going to be wiped out to interpret it and sort of put the wheels in motion really, and there's a lot of unknown and a lot of questions that are unanswered at the moment. So for them to be that go-to person, their sort of stress levels are through the roof. So we had a Wednesday wellbeing webinar yesterday, and again we talked through, so what is it that can we do each day to build that resilience, and my main takeaway with that is and it's to echo what Paul said on the call last week, was how are we supporting our colleagues. And this one guy has sort of reached out to everyone within his network, within his and he works in a global role, to just say, I'm here if anyone wants to chat. But then he was inundated. So it was all about, let's write a list of the people that we're supporting within our little circle in our network, albeit neighbours, like friends, family, and sort of your work community, but also write a list to say who's supporting me. And I thought that was quite interesting. It was to make sure that the two lists have some balance. So I think if someone is feeling quite overwhelmed and what is it that I need that support on, is their support network strong enough, and are they feeling really overwhelmed and stressed because they are supporting everyone else and not looking after themselves? So it was just a nice little reflective sort of takeaway that I took from that.
I think that's a great little exercise that you've just talked about in yourself, your two lists. Who am I supporting and who's supporting me? That would be a lovely exercise for some apprentices to do, actually, wouldn't it? Just something really nice and simple like that.
And the thing is, sometimes when it is so simple, we don't do it because we overcomplicate things too much. But then that was the main one for me, and obviously some podcasts that they shared. So I'm more than happy to put them, what they suggested, because they'd sort of spoke between the three of them. So we extended that to the rest of the group. So I can put those on this LinkedIn group as well. If you want to share it on, and exactly, we were in that space, as in there's a lot of talk around it, but actually, what can I do sort of each day to help myself?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, we as an employer have teams meeting at 9 o'clock every morning with our teams, and another one at 4 o'clock every day. And whereas it started off perhaps in week one as sort of focusing everyone in terms of, you know, what their tasks for the day were, etc., and then feeding back, actually now it's evolved into how is everyone doing. And you know, what's frustrating you, how are you feeling, etc., and just that sort of support, and that's far more beneficial for everyone. And sort of the tasks and everything, because everyone knows what they need to be getting on with and focusing on, that becomes a sort of a byproduct, if you like, of the sort of discussions. But equally, we're supporting our learners, and we're in direct contact with our learners, but actually it's with the employers. And I think I mentioned it last week, but I got another really good example from a meeting that we had with an employer yesterday, and it was because they had misinterpreted the guidance around furlough for apprentices. So we'd arranged a meeting, we discussed the guidance and what their interpretation was, and actually it was this one person who works in a compliance department who's now having to manage 30 training providers. And you know, bless her, she was just overwhelmed, and you know, she was very stressed, she was very frustrated, and just welcomed the opportunity. The only provider that arranged to sit down and go through everything with her. So we've now arranged that we will do it every week with her. So she'll just have an opportunity to discuss anything that she wants to around, you know, anything apprenticeship related, where she can just bounce off us and just have that sort of security blanket, if you like, in terms of, you know, a provider that's willing to support. But she, you know, she emailed back straight afterwards, said how much she appreciated us taking the time out, etc. And it's just so important, because that one person responsible for God knows how many hundreds of apprentices, and you know, she feels it's all just been left with her. So if she doesn't make the right decisions, that's going to impact so many other people. And she's feeling that responsibility, she's feeling that stress, but there's no one within her organisation that's currently supporting her, and that's just so hard for an individual.
Wow. I think that's really good what you said for your team, Paul. So we did that check-in as well, but what we also did at the end of the call was a check-out. So we just went round everyone again and just said what we've discussed, some of challenges, what you're going up against. Are you feeling better now? Or is there anything more as a group that we can do to support you, or do we need to follow it on from another time?
Right, yeah.
So I found that really helpful with them. Yeah, brilliant. But it's a shame that she's feeling like that, isn't it? Like you think so up against it, and so it's really nice that you've been able to reach out to her.
Yeah, absolutely, because so many people are in isolation, literally. So, working from home, working from wherever, but just, are in isolation. And, there are clearly within her organisation, there are so many colleagues who have been furloughed. So what they've clearly done is merged and amalgamated a number of roles and just give them to individuals to have to work through without little or any support. And that can be really, really stressful for individuals. So we're supporting a number of employers now. And like I said, just building those relationships, building that rapport, is only going to be beneficial for everyone in the immediate, but also going forward, and that's really important as well.
Definitely help them in their time of need, and then they hopefully remember that.
Yeah, and just to add to the information that I uploaded to the group. So Remploy won a contract funded through DWP to support employed individuals, and that includes obviously apprentices, and it's a free service. So anyone who is worried about their mental health or feels that they may need to access some support can ring that 0800 number, and then they will be booked in with a counsellor who will then ring them back. They will get some initial information from them, and then they will arrange a session. And that initial consultation would then decide if they can continue supporting them or can signpost them elsewhere for support. But that entire service and the follow-on is free. It's funded through DWP. So just so that everyone's aware, the sort of background behind this and the thinking from DWP is they recognise the impact that mental health issues are on the economy. So that's why they're funding this support service, is to provide that support for those who are currently employed to ensure that they are supported and stay in employment. That's the fundamentals behind this. But I think it's a fantastic resource, a fantastic service, but so few employers and so few individuals actually know that that service is available.
Which is crazy, isn't it? Because it sounds amazing in terms of if you're an apprentice or whoever just needing that support at that time. And that kind of more professional help can get expensive, or you end up waiting at least 12-24 months on the NHS if you need it. So that sounds amazing. And I think going back to your lady was it a lady that you spoke to at the employer that was
yes,
going back to kind of, if I was in her shoes and I had an email or a call or a regular touch point or a newsletter or something from you or a supplier that said, did you know you can access this? I'd be like, oh my God, that's amazing. That's exactly what I need with my apprentices, or I personally need right now. So again, it's that just added value piece, isn't it? That if we're emailing our employers or regular, I don't know if many of you guys do a newsletter or anything like that, but that kind of stuff is so valuable, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Thank you. I think Christine's just joined us. So thanks, Christine, for being with us today. That's great. Have we got any other kind of good shares around kind of mental health and supporting apprentices in terms of momentum and keeping them on board, and the types of conversations we're having perhaps around that?
I have to say, at the moment, I'm struggling a little bit with my apprentices because they are all adult apprentices. So they're management apprenticeships that we're delivering. And they are a mix at the moment. So some of them have been furloughed. Some of them, this is all within one business, some of them have been asked to, they're still being paid, but they're sort of doing 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off, or some are doing a week on, a week off and stuff like that. So I'm struggling a little bit to get momentum going, because normally I would do something by cohort, and I'm struggling to get them all together. And technology, because the dockyard that we work within is also a problem as well, because just trying to get some sort of platform that we can work on. So I am doing regular emails and stuff like that, and offering people to, if they want to, have a chat and things like that. But other than that, I'm sort of struggling at a bit of a loss at the moment as to what to actually offer the actual apprentices rather than the client who we deliver the apprenticeship for, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes absolute sense. And the first thing that came to mind for me, and I don't know whether you're doing this or not, Julie, already, but I bet my bottom dollar that everything they're going through right now is building that management skill set in the moment, practically.
Absolutely.
What they're doing.
That was part of the email that I sent out, and just said, whatever you're having to deal with at the moment, get it recorded as your 20% off the job, because these are absolutely perfect new skills that you're using. You're showing your adaptability, your resilience, all those things. So yeah, absolutely. But I think and some people have got laptops, some people haven't got laptops that they can log into from work. So it's just a little bit, I am having to sort of do it sort of almost person by person. Luckily, it's not a massive number. So it is keeping me busy at the moment, but it is almost like, one size doesn't fit all for this client at the moment. So yeah, but I think, like you said, that was exactly what I put on the last couple of emails. When you sat there thinking that I haven't got anything to add on here, you've got tons of stuff that you're doing very, very differently. Luckily, a number of them are at the point where they need to do the Evolve testing. And there's been some news on the apprenticeships to say that, because we do ours with the ILM, to say that they are going to allow people to do Evolve tests from home now rather than in like exam conditions. So that's coming through. So that was quite a positive, because a number of them have done everything they need for the qualification, and are just waiting to do the last 2 units so that they can physically get their certification signed off. So they are quite positive things as well. So I'm just waiting, and I'm just literally giving them an update of no information, just to say, listen, this is what's going on. I've got nothing else to tell you. And I think it's really key just to keep people informed is one of the main things from my point of view.
I think the other thing, Julie, is having a sort of change of mindset, both for yourself and for the apprentices, because actually, for those who are being furloughed or who are doing week on, week off, or 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off, it's the off bit that gives you and them the opportunity. So if they're restricted at work because of technology, are they as restricted at home? And if the opportunity is there at home for them, that's when you can interact with them and deliver the training part. So then when they're at work, they're back focused on what they need to be focused on.
Yeah,
so you're not losing that interest. It's just a change of mindset, isn't it? Because normally you think it's all around work, but actually this presents a different opportunity for everyone.
Yeah, and I think it's getting the people out of that mindset, because I think what they're seeing is, I've got 3 weeks off, even though I'm being paid for it. So it's getting them onto the computers and to answer their emails and stuff like that. So, and because the client hasn't actually told me per person what the situation is with them, I can't really go in there and say, hang on a minute, you're being paid, get back here and have this conversation with me. Sort of, obviously not like that, but I can't always do that, because I'm not 100% certain. The client will say one thing and the learner will say something different. So, but it is a case of just keeping on. And I'm just not giving up on them, and I'm just carrying on with it, really. So to try and get them to, to almost give in and just carry on with it, sort of thing. But I think once the Evolve testing comes through, that'll be quite useful, because that will be something, that they've physically got to log in and do, and they've got to almost say, yes, I can do it, or no, I can't, because I think like I said, some of them haven't got access to work computers, and I don't know if that's going to be an issue with Evolve or not. I don't know yet, because it's not been agreed yet. So,
and that's where the relationship with the employers are really key, isn't it, Julie? To keeping them updated in terms of what can and can't happen.
Yeah.
And actually, we certainly don't use this as the main sort of driver or anything, but the employer has a number of agreements: so the apprenticeship agreement, the employer agreement, commitment statement, etc. Which actually it sets out the commitments that they're making for that individual in delivery of that apprenticeship. So what you're doing is just ensuring that they're not in breach of the agreements that they've got in place.
Yeah.
So, it's making sure that they're aware of what the options are to make sure that they stay compliant for those agreements. What language you want to use and how you want to convey that message is up to you. we certainly wouldn't put it in that formal sense, but actually in advising them, you're making sure that they stay within the realms of what's set out in those agreements, and that's really, really important for them.
I guess the slight complication there for Julie is that in acting as the subcontractor for the delivery of the ILM qualification, I know that Julie's also having to try and manage that the main provider is having those appropriate conversations, because without naming the main provider, it's fair to say that they've not been as quite on it as we would have liked them to have been.
Right. So there's an added dimension there.
Yeah, so I've got a call tomorrow afternoon. Now, this is the same thing. So we should have had a call last Wednesday, and I tried to organise one the week before, and the first time they've been able to get together for a call, and it's only 2 other people from the main provider, is tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock. And it's just, it's one of those things that, but at least, it's quite good that I've had this conversation before I go into that call. So I think there needs to be some responsibility and some communication coming through from the main provider as well. Absolutely.
Yeah, and then your relationship with the main provider and the responsibility of that main provider, so separate from the employer and their commitments and their agreements, is they need to justify those monthly payments that are being drawn down. I don't know whether it's levy or non-levy, but regardless, it's through the funding mechanism. Then you and they need to evidence that the learner's on programme and that the learner's participating. So what you're trying to do is, again, to make sure that they're being compliant in what the requirements they have to meet from a funding perspective. So you need them to support you, and the best way to do that, whether that's jointly or whether they allow you to have those conversations on their behalf with the employer to inform the employer of what you're going to be doing to support.
Yeah. No, and I think it's absolutely right that the college and employer need to, we need to perhaps have a conversation, all 3 of us together, just to make sure that we're all singing, we're all saying the same thing. Because what's happening at the moment, I think that I'm the only person communicating anything out to the learners at this moment in time.
Well, you've done very well to get a conversation with a college at 3 o'clock on the Friday during the Easter break.
Absolutely.
I wasn't going to say anything, but...
Yeah, absolutely.
I think
it might be cancelled yet, who knows.
Yeah, sorry to put in, but I think the other thing as well to consider is that for the employers and certainly some of the providers and Julie, you said with your subcontracting, for the first period there was this oh my god panic and trying to get things sorted, and a lot of things have been sorted and things are settling now. And also from the apprentices' perspective, there was this, I agree with you, this I'm on holiday for 3 weeks, or we're all in lockdown for 3 weeks, but then it's all going to go away. And actually it's not. And people are now starting to actually realise that this is going to be a longer game and that things do have to change in the bigger picture. And also people who have been, in some cases, put on a more permanent furlough or sort of told to work from home and what have you, boredom's starting to set in as well. And they've done all the bits and pieces of things. And so now is a good time, I think, to really get people starting to think about their future. Yeah. So I think you might see a definite shift. I'm certainly picking that up.
Yeah. Well, I've got a couple of emails. I've only got 3 cohorts running at the moment. So what I am planning to do is directly after I've had the conversation. So I've got 3 emails ready to go out just as group emails to each cohort. And just at the point where I was just waiting to see because obviously they've announced another 3-week lockdown, haven't they, on the government this morning. And I think that the client that I'm working with have also, before that, had said they were going to do another 3 weeks. So I think I'm just going to make sure that I get something out, just before the weekend, just so that they've got that ready to go. And and I can just then perhaps try and organise some one-on-one stuff in the next week or so with different people, just to talk about what they can be doing, and to get them moving forward with this. Because, like you say, it's an ideal opportunity, and as Christine just said, I think people, they probably have painted their fences now and done all that stuff, and they need to get back on track with things.
And Paul's right as well about the payment side, because 3 weeks isn't a month. So there is still a little bit of time in that month to be able to prove that you have given the support. But if you now, as we're now going into another 6 weeks, that potentially will lose a month completely, and that could have significant impact when it comes to funding and clawback. And providers don't need that clawback right now.
No. Thank
I
you
think
for all that.
that's a really good conversation. Also, I think that I think we're expecting an announcement this afternoon, aren't we, from the government around how lockdown is going to be potentially extended. That in itself might be a good excuse to reach out to all clients to say, off the back of the announcement, can we suggest this as a way forwards, X, Y, Z? It gives you a good excuse to reach out, I suppose, doesn't it? Just an idea.
Definitely, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. And again, we start this conversation about mental health and well-being, and I think for most people, 3 weeks was manageable in terms of a lockdown. Now to hear the message that it's going to be another 3 weeks, I think you're going to again see a shift in people's reactions and for some people, unfortunately, their mental health in terms of being able to cope with that. Some people would already have been able to set themselves and make a sort of a decision that this is probably going to be for the foreseeable future and not need that sort of time frame to operate in, but many others actually do. So, 3 weeks was manageable for them. For some people, again, another 3 weeks might still be manageable, but for others, it might be quite difficult. I know I've got 5 children, and I know certainly my children thinking another 3 weeks of total lockdown is going to be absolute hell for them. They've just about managed these 3. So, and again, that's another, add-on, if you like, for those who have children or people who they care for, etc. That added responsibility, that added stress within their lives. So I think as well as work or as well as anything else that they're trying to cope with, to have that as well. I'm not offloading here, by the way. I'm just letting you know. That might be really, really difficult for them. So that's something else to bear in mind. And that has absolutely nothing to do with work. That has nothing to do with an apprenticeship. That's just what's happening in people's lives and how they're managing to cope with that. So it's those types of conversations, because if you get them in the right frame of mind, and if you get them feeling supported and then feeling confident and being able to share with you, then they might then be in the right place to actually be able to progress with work or their apprenticeship or whatever else it is that they're doing.
I think on top of that as well, Paul, you're right in that if you can build that foundation, things may well get worse for a lot of people over the coming months, because surviving financially for 3 weeks is very difficult, very different rather, to thinking that you might have to survive financially for months. And I think when the companies going into administration like Oasis and Warehouse, and there's already talk in the press about companies needing to start consultation at the end of this month because they won't be able to meet payroll. So I think there might be some people that start to feel it build and build and build over the coming weeks, in that they thought they were coping with 3 weeks, but now they're coping with bigger threats. And so the relationships that we build to open doors to talk to people now may well stand them in very good stead in the future.
Yeah, very good point. Very good point, Anne.
Sarah, are you hearing anything similar from your HRD community around that point that Anne just raised around that added pressure and stress? Because obviously they'll be worrying about payroll and interruption loans and apprenticeship schemes. And what are you picking up?
Yeah, so from my learners, and my heart sort of goes out to them, is the fact it's like, what is that future of HR going to look like now? And obviously the part of their learning might be to develop strategy, look at like really fun things in HR, like reward recognition, what does the workforce planning look like, when actually what a company might need now moving forward is those redundancies, so very operational work. And even from at HR director level, working for a growing company, what are they? They're going to be few and far between at the moment. So it is all going to be operational, mergers, acquisitions, 2P, so very technical work. So for me, the advice that I've been given, one, to the HR directors if they have been made redundant or looking for another role, and again to my learners, is just at the moment it is about just doing what the business needs, but finding those opportunities. And it is all about, again, all your key skills come across. So how you're communicating, how you're building that credibility as yourself in that profession, and how can you still add value. So albeit it might not be the sexy side of HR that we want to all be doing, but actually the world that we're living in at the moment is dictating the work that organisations need. And over time, you'll be part of that journey in order to still be able to add that value and do the great work that we know as HR professionals, that a good people strategy can deliver to an organisation and positively impact those metrics. But at the moment, it is all just about sitting tight and what's the here and now, what's in the present, and how can we sort of utilise that better for our own skill set. So we did do a webinar actually on a global scale. So I had a HR recruiter from New York, and we were discussing what happened in 2008 in the financial crisis. So again, all about resilience. How did that change the world of business, the world of work? How did we draw on our experiences from that in order to help us to think, actually, we can come out the other side. Yes, it did change the world of business for a period of time, but through that, a lot of people retrained. They went and got other qualifications. So a lot of positive things came out of it. And I think that's what we need to look at for this opportunity now. So all the remote working that's come out of it, that's a great opportunity. And for my mental health and well-being, hopefully moving forward, and us not having that commute, having a little bit more trust from our line managers as well, and looking at those deliverables and those outcomes, and not necessarily the time that we sat in front of a desk. So I'm hoping to be able to sort of flip it, that HR have got this recognition that they've always deserved in my eyes from an organisation, and really be able to sort of see that added value come through over time. But I think just at the moment they are just in the thick of it.
Yeah, I love that. You know, how am I feeling right now, and what can I learn from what happened in the past, like the financial crash, for example. You know, how did we get through that as HR professionals or managers or whatever it would be, and what can I take from that now? So what's my research and my understanding that I'm doing now that I own as my own learning? I mean, it'd be great to rock up to endpoint assessment and I tell the assessor around how I looked at the financial crash, or I looked at resilience techniques, or I brought this into my management style, or whatever it might be. God, you'd be aiming for, you know, top marks around that stuff, because it would be really heartfelt and real, wouldn't it? So
yeah, and as well, there's like a lot of businesses that have like come out of the in the economy, so that they've been like grown in recessions, and I think that's a really good opportunity. So even the likes of Uber, they're a taxi company that own no taxis, and Airbnb that own no hotels. So it's about, so what are the opportunities for us in this situation? And it's almost like a blank page. We don't know what the businesses are going to need moving forward, which is really exciting, because it could be something that we haven't got in our skill set at the moment, or something we haven't thought about. So yeah, albeit our path might have, like, we might have to deviate from that path in a while for a time of period, but actually long term it will really help us to move forward and take that really, really, really big leap. So I think a lot of it is mindset.
it's going back to your point, Paul, around how you can add value to those employers right now, isn't it? And how you're going to stand out as the provider by supporting them to support the apprentices. So it's a double whammy, isn't it, from a client perspective, but also from keeping your apprentices on program perspective and their mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's no doubt that the support that you are able to provide your apprentices is actually support that you could provide to anyone. So inadvertently, you're automatically supporting the employers as well, but you're also using that to support your own staff and, dare I say it, yourself. So, you know, the support is there for everyone to be able to use and be able to access. It's just about getting those messages out there. And yeah, so that when you're interacting with those individuals, whoever they may be, they understand that the conversation doesn't necessarily have to be formally about, you know, the apprenticeship or a contract or whatever. We could just have a conversation, and that conversation might be about, how are you? How are things? How are you feeling? Is there anything that we can do? And there may be nothing that you can actually do other than just to be there and just to allow them to offload, because having that conversation, like the lady yesterday that we spoke with at the employer, she was just able to offload and talk about, you know, what she's currently feeling in terms of her position at the moment, how stressful it is she's having to deal with all of these providers. And all we said was, well, look, anything that you want to bounce off us, anything you want to talk about, anything you're not sure about, we're here and we're more than happy to do it. And then we said, look, we'll put in place a weekly call with you, and then you could just bounce off us. And that's just such a relief, a stress relief for her, knowing that there's someone there that she can actually go to.
I think sometimes as well, it's about having those conversations repeatedly, because you've already made that connection with that employer, Paul. So, you know, that's already been set in motion. But you might talk to somebody one week and they're actually fine. But I think the danger is we can assume that somebody is fine, but then, sorry, my phone's just going off, that somebody is actually fine. But they're not at all. And I think, you know, it's that old saying, isn't it? When the student's ready, the teacher will appear. And it's almost that drip, 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 because you can have a conversation with somebody and they're fine, and then they're not. And if you don't have that conversation, you don't make that connection. And so I do think the drip, 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 are you okay? Regular contact is going to be really helpful, because there's so much noise around at the minute. There's so many people saying so many things. There's so much free stuff out there that you can do this while you're on you know, either on lockdown or furlough or whatever, you know, use this time to do this skill. And people are, I think they're being a bit overwhelmed by all this stuff that is being bombarded at them. And I think, you know, as we're saying, we're going into a new phase now. This next 3 weeks it's a little bit more real. It's going to be a little bit harder. But it's that, I think it's that reaching out on a regular basis. That's where it will really make the connection.
Yeah, I agree, Christine. I think there's the informal route, which is that, and then there's a more formal route, which is your resources and stuff. But there's so much out there. I don't know about you, but I mean, I love LinkedIn, but at the moment I look at LinkedIn and it's just noise that's being thrown at you, isn't it? And it's quite difficult to sift the good stuff from the not so good stuff. And yeah, I mean, one kind of set of resources I can definitely recommend is you might want to link in with the guy called Mike Thompson, who used to be the director of early careers at Barclays Bank, and it was my mentor when I was at British Gas leading apprenticeships there. And Mike has set up on his own, and he now runs a company called Generation Healthy Minds. I think it's Gen Healthy Minds is the brand, and he's working with amazing apprenticeships and some business psychologists to just create free webinar resources particularly aimed at apprentices and graduates, and they're going down really well, and it's all free to access stuff and it's all recorded, and Mike is the kind of person that I admire Mike, because his intention is always aligned with his morals, it's always aligned with his behaviors and his actions, and it's all about mental health support for apprentices, you know, recognizing the stresses of the workplace in these days and stuff. So Mike's definitely a person to link into if you're not already, and access some of the Gen Healthy Mind resources that he's been provided. So that's that kind of more formal support compared to the informal support that you guys have been talking about. Is there any other kind of gems like that, any kind of worth connecting with, worth sifting through the noise and getting to something that's good, like some of the stuff that Anne and Paul have shared as well? Is anyone else kind of aware of anything like that?
I did notice that Corndale had promoted some resources for their apprentices, and I only had a quick look, but they did look pretty good, to be honest. So it might be worth taking a look at the Corndale site and the resources that they've made available around things like well-being, remote working, resilience, the typical sort of topics, really.
Yeah. They're a good some good people at Corndale, isn't it? Michelle and those guys, they're really passionate around flexible management and supporting people's well-being. So I'm not surprised to hear that they've got some good stuff. Yeah, they're really big now, Corndale, as well, haven't they? The last 4 years, the growth's been phenomenal. Okay, cool. So that's been a good conversation. We're now kind of 42 minutes in. Let's turn our thoughts to where we could add most value to each other for next week's call. So I don't know if we want another quick follow-up on any AAEB conversations that we've had over the last week or so. Paul, I know you were going to connect with Adam on some of that stuff. Did that conversation take place?
Yeah, absolutely. Adam, very kindly, we had a call on Thursday afternoon actually, and Adam was very open in terms of what Heart have been doing regarding AEB and how they've promoted. He was happy for me to feed back in terms of the conversation. So they're still at early stage, obviously. 300 learners to manage remote is a big cohort. They've limited their risk, whereby they're only enrolling them on one course at a time, so rather than concurrent courses. So they've still got a healthy pipeline of further courses for those individuals if they complete, but they're limiting the risk because they obviously understand that this is a new delivery model, a new regime, and that may have potentially a negative impact on their achievement rates going forward. So they want to limit that. But no, just really talked through the enrolment process. They're using both a digital enrolment process that's then followed up with a wet signature, and that's just something that they've chosen to do internally, so to cover both bases. But actually the digital process that Adam was talking through more than meets the audit requirements, but are just having a sort of double safety net, if you like, from that perspective. But yeah, no, he was, as I said, very open, and it was a really good conversation. So again, I'd recommend anyone that's looking to go down that route to have a conversation with Adam. We've spent the last week now trying to develop ours, taking some of the things on board that Adam shared. And as soon as we're at a point where we're ready to launch, I'll be more than happy to share with everyone to talk about what that looks like. Hopefully, that might be within the next week.
Wow, so let's move forward really quickly then.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's very, the other thing that Adam shared were the likes of Skills Network and Learning Curve Group, and the fact that they've got both platforms and content available. So, sort of off the shelf type courses, if you want to use those as a blended approach for delivery models. He says, it's not right for everyone. So he advised that you actually look at each individual course to see whether it's fit for purpose or not. But they'll be able to arrange access to those courses and do demos and so on. The key bit though is they are written to specific awarding organisations. So if I remember rightly, I think Learning Curve Group were NCFE, for example. So if you're not currently an NCFE centre, you then have to become accredited. And the unknown there is how are awarding organisations able to accredit centres during this current climate? So has that been suspended? Has that been relaxed? What does that look like? So again, that's another unknown that needs investigating. Fortunately for us and the courses that we're delivering through AEB, we've already got the accreditations in place. So that's not an issue for us. So we're not looking to deliver other courses to try and use up the funding, because that's not where we are and that's not what we're about. So it's really just digitising our current content and being able to deliver that. So as I said, wealth of information that Adam's got that might be useful for other providers, and I'm sure he'd be more than happy to have those conversations.
Fabulous. Okay, great. Thank you. Sounds like that was a good conversation. So thinking about where we are right now then, and I know we've got a mix of kind of subcontractor, main provider, etc., people delivering apprenticeships here. What is it that we would like to kind of think about for this week and then kind of action and bring to the conversation next week? Do we want to consider to keep rolling this conversation based on the fact that we'll know two things hopefully by this time next week? One will be the extension on lockdown, and the other will be hopefully the results of the UFI bid. So do we want to earmark next week's call for those kind of conversations, or is there anything in particular that people would like us to think about over the next week and people are needing support and help with right now that they'd like to flag?
No, I think they'd be really useful. I think something that we spoke about last week that we're going to touch on this week, but we can carry over, was we talked about little gems as to how we keep learners engaged. So I think that would be really useful, but maybe tied into that again, examples of. So rather than just talking about it, maybe if people are prepared to share examples of either types of platforms or type of materials, etc., that they're using. If not, then just being able to talk about it is equally good. But that probably ties in with certainly the two topics that you mentioned, Erica.
Okay, great. What's everyone else's thoughts on that? Anne, Julie, Christine, Sarah?
That sounds great.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea just to, like you say, just to, carry on with the conversations that we sort of said that we would, because we have got a few things that are going to be hopefully some clarity on later on.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've got some quite high up contacts at NOCN, so I might be able to make some inquiries of what they're doing for accreditation, because that might give a clue as to what's going on in other places. Because I think NOCN and NCFE, I think they work along a similar kind of model, so that might help with the other one. And the other thing that I can maybe, because most of the work that I do is around maths and English, and there's a lot of uncertainty around what's going on with the functional skills, and so I'll keep my ear to the ground, and if I do pick up anything, then I can feed that in next week as well.
Useful.
That'd be really useful. Yeah, thanks, Christine. That would be brilliant. Okay, thank you. Any other thoughts, Sarah? Anything from you?
No, really. It's just to sort of say that I'm quite, I wouldn't say nervous about what's going to be announced today, but interesting. So yeah, so I'm just sort of like hanging on there just to sort of see if there's anything more that I can do from a wellbeing point of view for the HR directors, really. So I'll probably get an insight into sort of if it is going to be redundancies, etc., and things like that. So I'm more than sort of happy to sort of share their thoughts of what's going on, probably at a higher level and higher scale into sort of this group as well.
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful to understand that kind of thinking and how that's coming through employers and therefore impacting apprentices and providers, definitely.
Yeah, and I sort of fly the flag going, don't forget them.
Yeah, exactly. Brilliant. Okay, that sounds really good. So gems to keep learners engaged. Let's continue the conversation. We will know more around lockdown and the UFI bid at that point. Christine's going to do some bit of digging with some contacts around assessment, etc. So that would be great. And yeah, Sarah will keep feeding in those insights from a HRD senior perspective. I think that's really helpful. Okay.
Yeah.
If that's okay for everybody, thanks ever so much for your input again today. It feels like the conversation's rolling quite nicely, so that's fab. I'll put some summaries on the group, and I'll put the recording on the group as well, and then we'll catch up next week.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good week.
Thank you,
everybody.
everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, Erica.
Bye.
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 Bye.